Thank you for joining the RTC's Operations Subcommittee meeting. Chair Eric Hawkins, staff is ready for you to begin. Eric, I think your line might be muted.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry. Okay, good afternoon, Chair Eric Hawkins for the record. I'd like to call to order the July 21st, 2020 meeting of the RTC Operations Subcommittee. RTC staff will begin with a roll call of subcommittee members, introduce staff on the line, and touch on a few housekeeping items.
Thank you, Chair Hawkins, David Gloria, Management Analyst for the RTC for the record. I will be calling your name in alphabetical order. Please confirm your attendance as I read your name. Jimmy Benoit?
Yes, I'm present.
Michelle Castro?
Here.
Eric Hawkins?
Here.
Jim Keane?
Here.
Tom Cruise?
Here.
And Tim Reisman?
Here.
Thank you. Also, please note that we have several RTC staff on the line for today's meeting. This includes Mr. Joe Damiani, Manager of Engineering, Ms. Teresa Gaser, Manager of Engineering, Ms. Gina Kendall, Principal Project Engineer, Ms. Julia Uravich, Senior Project Engineer, and Ms. Eileen Pastor, Government Affairs Supervisor, will be reading public comments. We also have Mr. Rodney Schilling from the Nevada Department of Transportation with us on the line. As the chair mentioned, I have a few housekeeping items to go over. When the chair asks for comments from the subcommittee or calls for a vote, please remember to unmute yourself before speaking. Remember to state your name for the record before providing comment. Be sure to mute your line if you are not speaking. Voting will be done verbally. The chair will call for ayes and nays. If there are no nays, then the motion will carry. If there are nays, then a roll call vote will be required. In the event of a roll call vote, please wait for your name to be read to provide your vote. The chair will call for any comments or questions after an item has been presented. Thank you, Chair Hawkins.
Thank you. Mr. Damiani, for the first item, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair Hawkins and members of the subcommittee. Joe Damiani, Manager of Engineering for the record. The first item on your agenda is to conduct your first citizens participation period. As you know, on March 22nd, 2020, the State of Nevada Executive Department issued Declaration of Emergency Directive 006, which suspended the requirement to have a physical location for public meetings. Pursuant to that Directive 006, and for the health and safety of the community, this public meeting is being held telephonically. To allow for public participation, the RTC is accepting public comments via email at publiccomments@rtcsnv.com. Comments can be submitted to be read aloud or to be added directly to the written record. Ms. Eileen Pastor, Government Affairs Supervisor, will read the public comments received by the RTC.
Thank you. Chair Eric Hawkins for the record. This is the first time set aside for public comment. This time is limited to comments on items included on the agenda. Comments will be limited to the first 500 words, with the remaining words to be included in the written record. Do we have any comments?
Thank you, Chair Hawkins. Again, Eileen Pastor, RTC Government Affairs Supervisor for the record, and there are no public comments to a posted agenda item.
Thank you, Eileen. Moving on. Mr. Damiani.
Thank you. Joe Damiani, RTC. Item number 2 is to designate officers for 2020-2021. The RTC policies and procedures provide that the chair and vice chair of the Operations Subcommittee be rotated alphabetically by entity and designated annually every July. Staff would recommend that the new chair would be a member from the city of Las Vegas, and the new vice chair would be a member from the city of North Las Vegas.
Okay, are there any comments or questions from the subcommittee? Okay, if we have no questions or comments, do we have a motion to follow staff recommendation?
Jim Keane, Boulder City, move to follow staff recommendation.
Eric?
I think I didn't hear that. Could you hear me?
Oh. Jim Keen, Boulder City. I'll move to follow staff recommendation.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. Okay, looks like the motion carries.
All right. It's Joe Damiani, RTC. I'd like to take the time to thank Eric Hawkins for his service for the past year as chair for the subcommittee. And with that, we will turn it over to Mr. Tom Cruise to preside over the remainder of this meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Damiani. Chair Tom Cruise for the record. Please move on to the next item.
Okay, item number 3 is to approve the minutes of May 19th, 2020. The meetings are in order and ready for your approval.
Are there any questions or comments from the subcommittee regarding the minutes? If there are no questions or comments, do we have a motion to approve?
Jim Keen, Boulder City. I'll move to approve.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. The motion carries. Thank you. Now let's move on to the next item.
Thank you, Joe Damiani, RTC. Item number 4 is to receive a presentation from the State of Nevada Department of Transportation regarding an effort to gain experimental approval for the application of green pavement to supplement shared lane markings statewide. Mr. Rodney Schilling from the Nevada Department of Transportation is here on the line to provide the presentation.
Thank you, Joe. Rod Schilling for the record. Now for the presentation. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to give a little bit of the current state and the request for experimentation. This is for interim approval 14, and then the topic is for bicycle facilities and the manual on uniform traffic control devices regarding the green colored pavement with the shared lane markings. It's specifically regarding the green colored pavement as a background conspicuity enhancement to the shared lane markings. Next slide, please. For the next slide. And the reason why we're looking for the interim approval for the optional use of the green colored pavement for the bike lanes on interim approval number 14 is because it's a, whoops, could you go back, please? I think you're showing an example of it. Can you go back one slide? There we go. It requires a request for experimentation through the Federal Highway Administration. And what the department is looking to do is have a statewide uniformity and consistency for all agencies. Whoops, I think it kind of bounces around, at least on my screen. One more forward. I'm showing the current state. Could you go one more forward, please? There you go. Yeah.
I think it's delayed on your end, Rod.
Is it what?
Is
it delayed?
Might be delayed on your end. Are you looking for the picture or the second? No,
not the picture. So what I'll do is I've got a double screen. So anyway, that's fine. So what we're doing is looking for consistency and uniformity statewide. There's been an application up north, and we've coordinated this effort with our agencies up north, for the support and as a statewide issuance for the request for experimentation. So what I'm doing now today is kind of presenting this to the operations subcommittee group for Southern Nevada and seeking support for those agencies to have this as a statewide request. Go ahead, next slide. So here's a couple examples of it that are already in use in the city of Reno. And so what's happening is there was never a request for the experimentation. And since this has already been applied up in the city of Reno, we'd like to make sure that we have a statewide issuance for this request for experimentation and then gain support from all of the agencies to get this application. So that's the background with the green pavement marking with the shared bike lane symbol. So we want to make sure that as we do this, we have consistency. Next slide. So there's a couple of slides here that just shows the use of that. And there it is again. This is on California Avenue up here in the city of Reno. And go ahead, next slide, please. Maybe it's just a delay on my end, huh? So, and with the MUTCD, what it does is it discusses how you go about that process for the interim approval for, you know, the green colored pavement on a shared use lane. And there's been a lot of questions out there because there's already been approval for green colored pavement, and that's specific to the bicycle lanes. But however, that's not for the background, you know, with the shared use lane. So that is a definite no with that. We do not have a state request for experimentation. So what we're looking to do is follow the guidelines under the request for experimentation to make sure that we're in compliance. And it explains that process right here. And that's a link to it for the request experimentations, you know, through the paragraphs there in section 1A10. Go ahead and next slide, please. Maybe it's a little bit of a delay. And what I'm doing there is I'm showing you, once you go to that request for experimentation under interim approval number 14, it explains the process that you have to go through. And then the process that we'll do for the Department of Transportation, we'll do all of the application, and that's the sections there under paragraph 11 in section 1A10. There's two components that are probably the heavy lift that we're looking to make sure that we have that uniformity and consistency that we have to follow if we're granted that request for experimentation. One is you got to have two metrics in regards to the experiment to do the investigation for the motorist comprehension and understanding of the use, and the same thing for the bicyclist comprehension and understanding of the use. So what we'll do is make sure that we put those metrics in there and to make sure that we have that kind of agency consistency in use and the comprehension for both the motorist and the bicyclist. All right, next slide, please. So part of the future plans, what we're looking to do as part of our strategic highway safety plan is to make sure that we look at all of the user groups, especially our vulnerable user groups like the bicyclists and pedestrians and so forth like that, and to make sure, you know, that they're incorporated to all road users as part of the CEAs, your critical emphasis areas, and everything as part of the highway safety improvement program. So what we're going to do is look to do this as a partnership within the department as well. Next slide, please. And if all of the agencies support this effort, what we'll do is from traffic operations, NDOT will submit the request following the sections under IA10 of the MUTCD, submit that request to the Federal Highway Administration for the interim approval, and then paralleling those efforts, NDOT Traffic Safety will issue an RFP to assist in conducting the study elements to fulfill that experiment. Understanding that there's probably going to be some requirements of each of the agencies that are desiring to use the background conspicuity to the green Sharrow to assist in that study. And it's very similar to the RFB when we issued that statewide. request for experimentation. So there will be some coordination amongst each of the agencies during this whole process and everything else. That's if we're granted the approval. So we're looking to do this if we gain the support from all of the agencies. We will start that letter, draft it, and get that out there with the hopes of getting the approval from FHWA. Once we have that, then traffic safety will start the RFP and then work with those agencies that are desiring to do so, and then document each of these as we move forward. So anyway, that's kind of the background where we're at, and we're hoping to seek your guys' support in Southern Nevada for this effort. And I think that's the end of that. If you would go to the next slide, please. A little bit of a delay. What I've done is I've got my contact information in there for everybody, and maybe it's showing up on your slides. But yeah, if you guys have any further questions or anything regarding this, and if we have support from everybody, we would be glad to do this and work with our local FHWA office in drafting up this letter. And that concludes my presentation.
Tom Cruise for the record. Thank you, Mr. Schilling. Do we have any comments or questions from the subcommittee?
Mr. Chairman, this is Jim Keene with Boulder City. Rodney, I'd like to ask about the green coloring. How does it hold up out here? Because we know our striping gets blacked out pretty quick. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so what we're trying to do too is when we do this is we'll kind of develop the specifications that'll go out into the RFP that'll take into account both Southern and Northern Nevada. So we're looking at also establishing guidelines for the placement, with that in regards to, what they've done up here in the north too. We want a little bit better use for the standard in that. So we'll put those into the RFP and gather everybody's input. It's specific to, those agencies.
Thank you.
You bet.
Do we have any further comments or questions from the subcommittee? Being no further comments or questions, Joe Damiani, please move on to the next item.
Thank you. Joe Damiani, RTC. That'll bring us to item number 5, which is to discuss a regional GIS data scheme for transportation infrastructure. Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee, this item has been before you at previous meetings, and the RTC has had meetings with the City of Las Vegas and FAST about the status of current projects that potentially address this issue. It was determined that the City of Las Vegas project will not address this as we originally had thought. So we determined that we are going to be bringing an item to the August 6th, 2020 Operations Management Committee meeting to authorize the staff to create a project and establish a valley-wide master plan. As part of this project, we will provide status report to this subcommittee at each of its meetings until the project is completed. There is no action necessary for this item, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any comments or questions from the subcommittee?
Hey, Joe, I had a question. John Penuelos for the record. Does that mean this standing item is going to come off future agendas?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. And is the committee okay with that? I guess is the more important question. Again, John Penuelos.
City of Las Vegas is okay with it.
So, Eric Hawkins from City of Henderson. Just maybe a quick question, I guess, is the RTC still wanting this information to be, I guess, valley-wide or even entity-wide in some way?
Mr. Chair, if I may, Joe Damiani, RTC. Yeah, we want it to be valley-wide, and during this project, we'll establish all the parameters that we're going to be collecting, and we'd be working with all the jurisdictions to make sure we're capturing everything that they want, and then have a full-blown valley-wide master plan for all the agencies to use.
Perfect. Thank you.
So,
Do you have any?
I get again, John Penuelos, RTC. So I don't think this has been a standing item, and we're going to address it, as Joe pointed out, in a slightly different way, with updates as required to this subcommittee. David, we don't need a motion or anything to take this off the agenda. Since we prepared the agenda, the committee feels this is no longer a necessary standing item. The next agenda will just not include it. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion from the committee? With no further comments or questions, please move on to the next item.
Joe Damiani, RTC. That brings us to item number 6, which is to discuss and resolve various transit system and traffic engineering operation and law enforcement issues.
Do we have any questions or comments on this subject? Any more comments? If there are no more questions or comments, we can move on to the next item.
Joe Damiani, RTC. That brings us item number 7, which is to approve revisions to the uniform standard drawings with respect to the current accessibility best practices within the right-of-way. This is the next round of recommended revisions to the standard drawings. We've been going through these standard drawings in batches. This is the next list, and we will have one more after this. And this was at your last meeting, and I will refer to Jimmy as we go through these drawings to ensure that we address the county's comments. We feel we have addressed the comments that were sent over by the county, and I will go through each drawing, and I will summarize the changes. I'll ask for any questions or comments, and then I'll move on, and we will tackle each one of these. We have over 11, so we'll just go through these one by one. So with that, we'll start with drawing 244.9.S1, bicycle lane delineation, legend and signage. We are recommending adding note number 10 to refer the reader to drawing number 249 for the information regarding the placement of any signs. Anybody have any questions? And just for clarity, David, are you bringing up the items, or are we just using our backup?
Sorry, I'll switch right now.
Okay, so there's 249.9.S1. With no questions, we'll move on to drawing 249, standard street name sign post installation. We are recommending revising the notes as shown and removing any specific information for the foundation, where we will then refer the reader to drawing 249.1. That was one of the comments that came from the county. So let's just have one drawing that references the foundation details. Does anybody have any questions on drawing 249?
Yes, this is Jimmy Benoit with Clark County. So the sign without this drawing, without any specific references, doesn't mention anything about a lot of the items that are on the next drawing, such as the concrete pad for urban areas, things of that nature. How does someone who's going to apply this drawing know how to piece together all of the different pieces of information that they need from both these drawings?
I think, Jimmy, what we did was on note 1, we said refer to standard drawing number 249.1 for the foundation details, which we then had them, because they were conflicting. So in order to have both of them the same, we wanted to show it just one place.
Yes, I understand that, but there's other things other than the foundation details that are on this next drawing. There's a reference to the concrete pad for urban areas. There's not enough detail on that concrete pad as to the alignment of the foundation. Is the concrete pad flush with the ground? Is it subsurface? Is it on top of the ground? And how does that affect the 3 and 4 in 3-inch minimum and the 4-inch maximum clearance specified on the drawing? So there's a lot of detail that's kind of hard to piece together.
I guess I'm kind of confused because the post, this is for the sign, right? For the street name sign. So it's giving you the dimension and the type of the street name sign and all that. And then refers you to the next drawing, which then talks about all of those and has those dimensions and information on that you're just referring to for the concrete pad. So if they come to this drawing for the foundation, the sign that's on top isn't necessarily what's important, but this is giving the foundation details. At least that's the way I read it.
Yeah. And then if we go back to 244.9.S1, where it says to look at this drawing, and then they would look at this drawing, but this isn't really a street name sign until you get to 249.1. And then that's more applicable to the 244 drawing. But then this, so the only thing that's really different on this is your clearance from the ground and the configuration of the top of that signpost, right?
That's yeah, the one drawing is really just talking about the street sign installation. The next drawing is talking about any sign, any other sign.
Yeah.
And then they both reference the same foundation.
Yeah. I think we need a little bit more information on these, especially when it refers to the clearance above the top of the concrete pad for rural installations. We need to have some detail for that. I think I'm going to move to have these held for further evaluation.
Well, no, Jimmy, if we could, I'd rather just walk through your comments. And if we can get them addressed, I'd rather get them addressed and then move it on to spec. I don't know if we need, I mean, I can understand what you're saying. Are you just concerned that the 10-foot dimension needs to reference whether it's on top of the pad or not?
Well, there's nowhere where it shows how to install the concrete pad. So that has issue with the dimension from ground level and also the amount of foundation protruding above that concrete pad. So without any detail, how do we know what's being installed out in the field when you ask for a concrete pad?
Are you looking at drawing 240 or proposed 249.1?
I'm looking at that drawing.
And we say top of sidewalk or 24 by 24 by 4 inch concrete pad.
Yeah, and then you show that the top of sidewalk is flush with the ground level. Is that to infer that the concrete pad is also flush with the ground, the top of it?
If I read that drawing, then that top is either the concrete pad or the sidewalk.
Because it's not shown that way on the right side of that drawing.
No, because the right side is if it was in the ground surface.
So the concrete pad is flush.
So if you're installing a pad or the sidewalk, you use the one on the left. And then that would be your surface where you need to be 7 feet from the top. If you're installing it in just the dirt, you would use the one on the right.
Yeah, but there's no concrete pad shown on the one on the right.
Because you use the detail on the left if you're going to use the concrete pad. I guess I'm confused.
Well, it's asking
to install it in the dirt.
It's telling you.
Are you guys talking about, this is John Penuelos, are you the RTC, are you talking about 249 or 249.1?
249.1 right now.
Can you bring that up, David? Thank you. Okay, sorry.
It says rural installations. And then the note says all urban sign installations are to be installed in a concrete sidewalk or in a concrete pad. But there's no detail on that right side of the drawing that shows them how the concrete pad. I mean, are you to infer that this blank area is supposed to be the concrete pad?
No, I guess.
Flush with the ground surface?
I guess, Jimmy, I'm a little, I think we rely too much on these to try to capture every scenario. If you're telling me that you're going to require somebody in a rural installation to still install a concrete pad, then you're going to have to make them.
That's what note 9 says. It says all urban sign installations are to be installed in a concrete sidewalk or in a concrete pad.
Right. The left side is urban. The right side is rural.
Oh, and rural. Okay. So my misunderstanding then. So if it was a urban installation and you were installing it in a concrete pad, the top of the pad would be flush with the ground.
Correct.
So that your 3 to 4 inches would be above that, and your 7 feet would be based on to the ground level and also to the top of the pad level.
Correct.
Okay. Now I'm following it, I think. So I'm wondering now, between 249 and 249.1, there's no way to incorporate just this top of the sign detail into this drawing somehow and have just one drawing that you can refer to?
Well, that would require us to create a new drawing that included both street name and other. For whatever reason, Jimmy, we can take care of that when we do a wholesale Blue Book review, because right now these drawings existed as one, just a sign installation detail, and number 2, as a specific street sign. So I don't know how these got developed and how there was one for just a street sign and how there was one for other signs. But I agree with you. There's no reason why it couldn't be one. That wasn't what the intent of this item is. Yeah. This is to get the PROAG issues addressed. And as in case you guys don't know, but we at the next specification subcommittee meeting, we're introducing an item to authorize staff to start a working group to start reviewing all of the drawings and specifications so we can have that done within a year. So there's a lot of these that need to be cleaned up, and we were trying to not address everything that we could with these things as we went forward. We were just trying to get the PROAG issues straightened out at this time.
Yeah, it's not good to just leave things hanging out there that you know they're not
But I don't think
correct.
we are leaving them hanging out. These still address
No, I'm just
exactly how
saying.
they are today. And we're just addressing, we cleaned it up a little bit, and I agree it needs to go one step further, but we aren't ready at that point to go to that one step, that next step to combine these two. But you're absolutely right. There should be a sign installation detail for foundation and a sign installation detail for the mounting of the sign, right? And they should be one drawing. But I mean, ultimately, we're going to get there and clean these drawings up, but that wasn't what this was intended to do. So, you know, if we could, I would like to make sure we address your comments so we can move them on to the specs. But, you know, I want to make sure, because we have to get these done before we can start that wholesale thing.
Yeah. At least this clears up all of the inconsistencies in the installation of the foundation. That's a good thing.
Correct. That was a good catch on your end, and we're glad we went through there to take it off of one and include it all on the other.
Okay. All right. Well, you can move forward off of this drawing. It's just you might want to look at that 244.9 because you might want to call it to reference 249.1 instead because I think that's more applicable.
Yeah, I think we're gonna. I noted that when you said it, and I'm gonna take a look at that, and if it's appropriate, we'll make that change between now and spec.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else have any other questions on 249 and 249.1? Okay, with that, we'll move on to drawing 255.2. This is a typical transition section from the shared use path along a roadway to the sidewalk. We are recommending this drawing to be removed from the standards. This is a case-by-case scenario that really has no way in a standard drawing, so we're recommending it be removed and that it should be designed by the individual engineers on their plans. Anybody have any questions with that? Okay, if we could, we'll move on to drawing 724, the type I foundation. We are recommending removing references to conduit that will be specific on the plans. As you note, there's some conflicting things. One note says for conduit inside location C plans, and then the other, and then in the detail itself, we talk about a 2-inch conduit. And so we're referring people to the plans. And then we're also adding an option for the grounding. We're removing the dimension from the curb. And then we're adding note number 6 to provide specific instructions when the foundation is installed in the sidewalk. Does anybody have any issues or questions, comments on 724? Okay, that'll move us on to drawing number 725, the type J and the K foundations. We are recommending adding note number 7 to provide specific instructions when the foundation is installed in the sidewalk, as well as adding a grounding option. And we are replacing the dimension behind the curb with the term sidewalk. Does anybody have any questions on 725? Okay, that'll bring us to drawing 745, the 30-foot pole with school flashing sign. We are recommending adding note number 4 to provide specific instructions when the pole installation is installed in a sidewalk and some various details, some dimensional details and some references to other, as noted on the drawing. Anybody have any questions on drawing 745? Okay, great. Drawing 763, ITS communication conduit and pole box for existing curb and gutter, sheet 1 of 2. We are recommending removing this drawing since this case should be designed and shown on the plans. We don't want this to be a standard drawing because this is a unique scenario when things are existing and we have to design around it, and there should be specific details on the plan for this case. And the same goes for sheet 2 of 2, where we're recommending removing this for the same reason. So that takes care of drawing 763. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
Oh, yes, this is Jimmy Benoit with Clark County. So this provides guidance for how to go around obstructions and for how to enter into pull boxes. And we do quite a bit of this kind of work. Having these drawings would enable you not to have as many details in a set of plans to specify. I'm curious.
So the rationale, Jimmy, is that the ideal location is in the sidewalk. Even on where existing sidewalk, curb and gutter exists, the RTC feels we should be making every attempt to be in the sidewalk, and that being in the street, because as you know, that's not where people are expecting us to be, and therefore we want to try to avoid having us in the street. However, if we are in the street, we want to actually have a detailed plan that shows where we are and how we went around things in the street, so that we can accurately reflect it in either an as-built or a master plan. Because if we say that there's fiber between these two pull boxes and we didn't have a specific drawing showing that it's us in the street, and we're assuming it's in the sidewalk, and that allows for potential conflict and construction interferences by somebody cutting it by accident.
No, I understand that, but if you are in the street, this provides guidance for how it can be constructed. And it's, I believe it's good guidance to be providing. You can't always guarantee that it'll be all under sidewalk.
Well, I agree, but if it's being in the street, then it needs to be, the guidance needs to be provided by the engineer that's designing it. That's and the other reason for that, Jimmy, is that then this becomes a conflict of development at times saying, oh, we can just put it in the street, or the fiber, the communication companies coming in saying, oh, well, we could just put it in the street. And we don't want that. We want that to be approved individually. So, I mean, I understand your concern and I understand the guidance, but that's, in reality, that's what the engineers should be providing, is that guidance. It shouldn't become as a typical.
No, I see what you're saying. I mean, this works well for after the fact projects, but for development, yes, it should be in the sidewalk. And I believe that's how it's shown on that other drawing, showing the orientation of different utilities and things of that nature.
But
there's a lot of good information here that's a shame to do away with. Did I get disconnected?
No, you're still here.
Oh, okay. I got a tone and I got scared.
I guess my recommendation to you, Jimmy, would be if those are your concerns, this isn't getting removed, probably for another few months. It's got to go through spec and then EAC and then the board. I note your objection, and I think we ought to move it to spec and have your spec representative either come up with an alternative of why we would need it and where we're at, or we can go that direction. But I understand, and I would like to hear from any other agency that's on the ops to see, because that would be my recommendation. I understand, and I think we should discuss it as we go further in the spec.
Hey, Joe, this is Eric Hawkins from City of Henderson. I totally get why you want to remove it, but I'm kind of wondering if maybe there should be, and I know it goes against what you're trying to do, but some other alternative guidance for, like Jimmy's saying, you know, how it goes into the pull box and other utilities and all that. Is there any, like the 12-inch minimum clearance from obstruction, is there any other drawing that shows that?
That's probably some other codes in some other, you know, whatever you're obstructing is going to have more restriction than what this drawing is going to show. I don't even know if that 12-inch matches like the water district. You know, if you're going within a valve, I don't know what their requirements are. We're going to have to refer to what the obstruction is. So this just has a lot of information on it that, you know, one to me would need to be truly verified, and you know, I don't know what the clearance is between a gas valve, you know, or, you know.
It does say minimum clearance, so that leads you to infer, yeah, you better check what your clearances are supposed to be.
Which really goes back to the point of it's really not atypical. It should be something that's designed. And I think that's the part that we utilize these things way too much to try to incorporate all scenarios and alleviate the responsibilities of the engineers to show on the plans and on the drawings what it actually is supposed to be doing. I don't have a problem building things this way when it has to be done that way, but in my eyes, it should be completely designed and shown on a drawing that references what the obstruction is, what the clearances are, and you know, that's going to be my 2 cents. If you guys, you know, I'll take what you guys vote on it, and we'll move from there. But I'm not going to hold this. You know, we'll take, you know, what you would prefer to do with it, and we'll move that on to specifications. But we're not holding these drawings again from this time. But so we'll note comments when you guys have them. So if you guys are going to, you know, you can come up with in the recommendation that we move them all to specifications with the following comments, and then let me know what you want us to do. But I'll be honest with you, as we go through the full-blown, if it's still in the book, when we go through the Blue Book revisions, I guarantee you it'll wind up, it'll be talked again about getting out, because that's one of the main issues of the entire Blue Book, is to get rid of recommendations that are by case-by-case basis and things that should be designed. And we have lost that, and we rely too much on these things to do things that engineers are supposed to be responsible for. And with that soapbox, I'll leave it to you guys.
Yeah, you bring up a lot of good points, Joe, and it's hard for me to say that I don't want this to be removed, but yeah, I guess I'll just keep my original comment. Again, this is Eric Hawkins, City of Henderson. Just to leave it out there that it is good guidance. Understood what you're saying, that this is, you know, a rare scenario, but it does provide good guidance. The other question I had, and maybe this is just general for all of the modifications we're doing in this on this platform, is this is supposed to be for under the guise of or the guidance of current accessibility best practices?
Well,
is this
and
just
that's a good question. So the reason this came up is because one of the recommendations from Kimley Horn, the consultant on the best practices, was addressing the drawings because of the box. So because it had a pull box shown, it had a note to add for best practices about the vertical discontinuities in the box and the sidewalk. And that's why this was a part of the PROAG. And when we did that, we overrode Kimley Horn's recommendation to say, yeah, we could add that drawing, but in reality, we really don't even need this drawing. And that's why it's a part of this set. But that's a good question. That's how it came a part of the PROAG, because the recommendation, because it's a box, the drawing shows a box in the sidewalk, which then we would have to add the continuity note.
Okay.
So if we can, we'll move on. There's a bunch of other drawings to be removed that I guess if you guys have questions, then we can address those, and then we could try to formulate a recommendation. But if you don't mind, maybe we could just move on to the next one.
Sure.
Okay. That brings us to drawing number 764, and for the record, this is Joe Damiani, RTC. ITS communication conduit and pole box detail installed under new sidewalk. We were recommending adding the note to address the vertical discontinuities, and that would be a note on all boxes. Anybody questions on 764? Okay, we're going to move to drawing 805. Pedestrian pull push button post for special sign, 8'6" high, sheet 1 of 2. We are recommending this drawing be removed from the standards. Basically, this should be, it's special, even by it saying special in nature. It's something that should be designed by the engineer, and because not most of the time this standard doesn't even fit anyway, so they have to be per the drawing. So all these poles should be shown per the drawing. So that's sheet 1 of 2. Sheet 2 of 2 of the drawing 805. We are recommending this drawing be revised to reflect current practices as redlined. There's a bunch to go in there, but basically as it's being practiced to date, we're revising the drawing to reflect what's really being constructed out there on sheet 2 of 2, which then would just become the normal sheet. So does anybody have any questions on drawing 805? Okay. That brings us up to, I'm going to read these drawings 885, pole location and signal mounting intersection, 2-pole curbside sidewalks 1 and 2. Drawing 886, pole location, sign mounting intersection, 2-pole off sidewalk, sheets 1 and 2 of 2. Drawing 887, pole locations, signal mounting on right turn islands. Drawing 888.1, future pole location, case 2. And drawing 888S1, future pole location, case 1. And as you note, we wrote on blue on some of these drawings. That's not what the revision is to be, but it was a comment from the county to address why we feel they should be removed. And it goes back to the similar comment that these are typically case-by-case scenarios that really should be addressed by the engineer on the drawings. And unless somebody knows otherwise, every drawing I've seen always shows where these poles are going to be located and provides details as such. So, and then with that, if I'll start it off, but basically saying if nobody has any other questions or comments, staff would recommend that the subcommittee approve the proposed revisions and with any changes discussed, and then direct staff to add this item to the specifications subcommittee for approval. And
Chair Cruz, this is Julia Uravich for the record. Joe, it's our standard practice to send these to industry review prior to sending them to the next subcommittee.
Yeah, I just thought we would be doing them simultaneously, but yes, industry review is a standard practice. So it'll go to industry review and to the specifications.
Chair Cruz, for the record, so we're looking for a motion to approve the changes to the drawings as amended by our conversation here, discussion here.
If I would, we're recommending that we approve the proposed revisions and, direct us to move them on through the process. If somebody wants to add any specific comments for us to address and move them to specs, we'd be more than happy to.
Mr.
Chairman,
Chairman.
this is Jim Keen with Boulder City. I'll move to follow staff recommendation.
So we have a movement to follow staff recommendations and approve these changes to the drawings. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say nay. Okay, the motion carries. Thank you. Please move on to the next item.
Thank you, Joe Damiani, RTC. That brings us to item number 8, which is to receive a report regarding the current status of revisions to the Uniform Standard Specifications and Drawings. This is a standing item to provide an update on where the revisions to the standard drawings and specifications are in our system. This helps you guys track where they are. So they will go to industry review and then the spec committee, and you can follow along with each agenda. There's no action necessary for this item, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any comments or questions from the subcommittee? There are no questions or comments. Please move on to the next item.
Thank you. That brings us to item number 9, Joe Damiani, RTC, which is to discuss topics of interest. This is the opportunity for subcommittee members to share updates or information with other members.
Is there anything that a member of the subcommittee would like to share?
Mr. Chair, if I may, Joe Damiani for the record. As our community and agencies work through the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, I want to share with the subcommittee an update to our transit system. Due to the pandemic, the RTC's transit revenue has been severely impacted, and we are considering making system-wide service changes beginning in fall of 2020. Proposed changes include route eliminations, routing adjustments, and schedule changes. However, before we make any changes, we are currently holding a 60-day public comment period to gather input and feedback from our community. The comment period will remain open through Friday, August 28th, and we have provided all details in a brief survey at rtcsnv.com. We have also scheduled 4 public meeting opportunities during the last week of July and the first week of August. 2 meetings will be held virtually live via YouTube, and 2 will be held in person at our Bonneville Transit Center in downtown Las Vegas. We encourage you to review the service change details, public meeting information, and online survey at rtcsnv.com, and share the information with staff, family, friends, and neighbors who may be interested or impacted by these potential changes. And Mr. Chair, that's all that staff would have on topics of interest at this time.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments from the committee? If there are no other comments, we can move on to the next item. Thank you, Mr. Damiani.
Very well. Joe Damiani, RTC. This brings us to item number 10, which is the last item on our agenda, and it is your final citizens participation period.
This is the second time set aside for public comment. Just a reminder that comments will be limited to the first 500 words, with the remaining words to be included in the written record. Do we have any comments?
Thank you, Chair Cruz. Again, Eileen Pastor, RTC Government Affairs Supervisor for the record, and there are no public comments.
Thank you. With there being no additional comments, I will close this item. If there is nothing else, then this meeting is adjourned.